Blog Talk Radio.
Franchise interviews from Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia. You're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews. Welcome to Franchise Interviews, an up-close, behind-the-scenes look at franchising and entrepreneurship. Listen to interviews with franchisers, franchisees, franchise authors, franchise experts, and attorneys. And now, welcome your host, Marty McDermott, and Franchise Interviews.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Franchise Interviews, where for over 16 years now, we've been asking the Franchipreneurs one-on-one. I'm your host, Marty McDermott. I'm the president of Franchise Interviews, and we have a great show. We're meeting with Franchise Coach Scott Milas, and after 35-plus years of experiences, Scott has been a significant contributor in various senior leadership positions. Scott is a team player and recently utilized his experience in development to help build a well-known national fast casual concept. And his tenure in franchising has landed him on leadership panels at several franchise conferences. Scott has also earned his certification as a CFD, Certified Franchise Executive. We're going to talk to Scotty about that in just a moment on Franchise Interviews. So stick around because we have a great show.
Are you one of those special people who are willing to go after your dreams and goals? Are you ready to fulfill that dream of owning your own business with the security of a proven brand? The opportunity to take control of your future and own a Rita's Italian Ice franchise is within your reach.
Rita's is seeking success-oriented individuals who are ready to make a change in their life, and Rita's offers unparalleled training and support to assure your success. And did you know the frozen treat industry is a recession-proof industry?
Now here's the really good part. Rita's Italian Ice is a unique and amazing taste treat. It's smoother than a snow cone, and it combines ice with real fresh fruit. The real fruit adds dramatically to the taste, and it comes in over 40 flavors. The ice and fruit are mixed on site and made fresh daily, and it is delicious.
You'll want to know more about this exciting and successful franchise opportunity. Go to www.ownaritas.com and get all your questions answered. That's www.ownaritas.com to take control of your dreams and future today. You don't want to wait any longer to be a part of this adventure. www.ownaritas.com.
Hi, this is Connie McDermott, Administrative Assistant for Franchise Interviews, LLC, and you are listening to Franchise Interviews.
Franchise Interviews from Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia. You're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to a very special edition of Franchise Interviews, where for over 16 years now, we've been asking the Franchipreneurs one-on-one. I'm your host, Marty McDermott. I'm the president of Franchise Interviews, and as we were saying earlier, we have a great show today. We're meeting with franchise consultant Scotty Milas, and after 35-plus years of experiences, Scott has been a significant contributor in various senior leadership positions, and Scott's a team player and recently utilized his expertise in development to help build a well-known national fast casual concept. Hey, Scotty, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Hey, Marty, it's great to connect with you again.
It is great to connect. We always like to ask our guests, where are you calling from this morning, Scotty?
I am in Western Massachusetts, outside of Springfield, in a town called Longmeadow.
Oh, it must be great up there this time of year, isn't it?
Well, if we can get past the rain, yes. The leaves are just starting to turn color. It's a beautiful part of the year. But
it is.
The rain has been torrential, but like anything, it'll pass.
It will. It'll definitely pass. Yeah. You know, your story is so interesting, Scotty. You know, because one of the questions I wanted to dive into first is, you know, how you got into entrepreneurship, and then we can kind of segue into how you got involved in franchising. Because it seems like to me you got started at a very young age, didn't you?
Yeah, I did, and then I have to say there was one reason and one reason only that really kind of led me into business ownership, being an entrepreneur, is that I just did not enjoy school. I was just not. I just did not like sitting in a classroom.
Right.
It's just that's the only answer I can really give. I mean, it's trade school was out because my father and my parents at the time really didn't believe in trade schools, and they were really pushing me to education, and I kind of fought it tooth and nail, and here I am.
Right. And then how did you get involved in franchising then, Scotty? Like, how did you transition? Like, what was it about the franchise model because you're really passionate about franchising, aren't you?
I am. There's a funny story. When I came home with all my bags packed my freshman year of college, middle year of college, my father asked me what I was doing, and I said, well, I'm quitting school, and I need to know if I can borrow $20,000 because an Italian family that I had become friends with over the years, their father was my baseball coach, Little League coach. There were 4 brothers. We became very good friends, and they owned a pizzeria and wanted to open a second pizzeria. They were asking me to be a partner. And, I won't tell you what my father said or what his response was, but he basically said, if you really like this, quote, food thing, maybe you should go to the McDonald's School of Management.
Right.
And I won't tell you what I said to him because it would be appropriate radio conversation. But anyway, that's how I really got into franchising. But the second component, how I really took a deep dive into it, is that I helped a friend of mine's son open a pizzeria, local pizzeria, and was spending some time with them, helping them build the place and opening it. And his brother. My friend's brother was starting a fast casual better burger concept and would come into the pizzeria and we would chat. And finally, one day he offered me a position. Started out in the operations side and worked my way up until the development side. And the rest is history, being involved in franchising.
What do you like most about franchising, Scotty?
Well, there are a couple of aspects that really stand out, Marty. First of all, the industry is small, but it's large enough where everybody can be successful. So given the right tools, given the right part of being in franchising, there's an opportunity to be successful. That's number one. Number two, the people in most cases, at least the people that I have come across, are genuine individuals who care about business, entrepreneurship. So I love the industry. I love what it stands for. And I think it's a great opportunity for people that want to get into business. They may not have all the necessary tools to be a independent business owner or want to go down that route. So those are the couple of things. But the industry is a lot of fun. Like I said, it's large enough but small enough. The old saying, you've been around the block, there are no secrets in franchising. So it's just a great industry. It really is.
You and I, because I've been on your podcast, Scotty, and you and I were talking last time, one of the things we were discussing is, how franchising doesn't discriminate, so it doesn't matter whether you have a high school diploma or even a doctorate degree. It doesn't discriminate. You could be equally successful, couldn't you?
Yes, you could. And I think that's, one of the, great things, as you mentioned, is one, you don't need industry experience in any particular industry to be a successful franchisee because, franchisors want to bring you in and be able to train you to be successful. So there's that opportunity. But you're absolutely right. You don't need a 4-year degree or a master's or a PhD. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't, but you don't need that to be a successful entrepreneur owning franchises or multiple franchises.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I'm interested, Scotty, because it makes sense, in looking at your long career, for you to become a franchise coach, consultant. Maybe you could tell our listeners what you do and how you do it.
Well, as I said to you, the franchise industry is a large industry. I mean, it is small in some ways, but it's also a large industry. When you really put it into perspective, there are 4,000 opportunities out there. Yeah. I'd like to sit here and tell you that all 4,000 are great opportunities, but some of them aren't. There are some devils in the business. You have to be careful. So I think the first thing that I do with my clients in helping people is really help them focus on their why. Why do you want to do this?
Yeah.
Waking up in the morning and not liking your job or not liking your boss is really not a valid reason to be. It's part of a reason, but it's not the reason on why you should be a franchisee, own your own business, an entrepreneur. So figuring out the why, building that business model, understanding their skill sets, what they would be good at, what they wouldn't be good at, and then being able to introduce the opportunities that kind of fit into their profile, that business model, and then making sure that they're asking the right questions to eventually get to a point of a validated decision and not an emotional decision. Because as you know, and you've been around the block, fear and anxiety is going to set in. It rears its ugly head. So we have to weave in and out of fear and anxiety as well. So a validated decision is the most important.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's well said. Do you know early on, Scotty? I mean, when you're meeting with someone for the first time, I mean, can you tell if they're kind of a match for franchise? Because franchising, I think I mentioned this too on your last show. John Hayes once said, franchising is not for most people, and I wasn't sure what he meant by that, and it took me a long time to understand that. Do you know early on, like if someone is going to be a match or for franchising or not?
Yeah, there are triggers. I mean, when I start talking to my clients and I start getting questions of more of can I do that or why can't I do that or how do I do this if I don't want to do that or I don't like paying royalties. Why do I have to pay royalties?
Right.
Those are some pretty good signals about someone who may not be cut out for owning a franchise versus questions, what are the royalties for? Why am I paying royalties? Or, how successful is it? How successful are they doing it the way they're doing it? So, yes, there are some triggers. And, again, the key so the key for owning a franchise is being able to follow the process, to delegate the best practices of the system. So if you're not somebody who's comfortable delegating and following a process, then franchising may not be you. I always put it, because I have a lot of food experience, I always tell people if you're the type of person that wants to own a restaurant or, any type of food concept business, and if you're the type of person who wants to get up in the morning and make your own soup, franchising is probably not for you.
Right. Agreed. Good analogy, Scotty. Absolutely. And, when you're meeting with them, Scotty, I mean, have you had experiences where, I think I was telling you this story last time I was on your podcast, where there was two gentlemen and I think they got into, it was a fish window cleaning, and they were really surprised because they didn't see themselves in that type of industry. Have you had that experience when you're meeting with some of your clients where you kind of steer them towards an industry that they may have never even considered?
Yes, absolutely. That is part of our process. And I have to say, and I'm kind of a little bit of a numbers nerd on analytics. I would say that 75 to 80% of the people that I do work with end up making a right turn and invest in a franchise or an opportunity, a category that they really never thought. And when they start open the window and put themselves in the position of learning and listening to what the business is all about, they realize that their skill sets probably land more towards what I'm showing them and suggesting versus what they think. So the idea of looking at a franchise is it's important to be open-minded. It lends to someone being successful. So, it's you'd be surprised how many people think they know what they want and realize that, no, wait a minute, you're right, that's not what I want.
Right, absolutely. It was funny because last time you and I were talking about, I mentioned, when I asked sometimes, what advice would you give to someone going into franchising? And a lot of times the guests on my show, they talk about passion. I mentioned to you it's over 50% of the time. And you and I kind of agreed that, it really has to go beyond passion, doesn't it? I think you and I were talking about the significance of ego and things like that. And, there's so many variables come into play, don't they?
Yeah, they do. I mean, I kind of like to use the saying that if you're really going to step into business and really want to do this, is that your motto has got to be failure is not an option. You really have to put yourself in the position that if you concentrate and go through the process trying to figure out everything that's going to go wrong. I mean, having an exit strategy is one thing, but if you're going into this figuring out, all the things that are going to happen that are going to make you fail, then you shouldn't go into business. You have to look at this as being on the positive side. So passion is great. I would never, criticize anybody that has passion to want to do something, but it goes a little bit further. It goes a little bit further down the road than just passion.
Sure. Yeah. No, absolutely. What are your thoughts, Scotty, on all these things happening? Right. What do you think about, all of this stuff going on, like particularly in California? You hear a lot of the challenges that are going on with franchisees in California. Have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, first of all, a big shout out and high five to the IFA and their team for really getting involved in this. As a member of the IFA, it's comforting to know that there's an organization that's, out there fighting for what I call the little guy. Whether you own 85 Great Clip salons or one Subway, the IFA is fighting for what they believe in and protecting the rights. And I believe, and I side with the IFA, that, every franchisee, as much as they're part of a franchise system, is an independent business owner, and they should be treated as an independent business owner. And, I know they've come to some type of resolutions. They're meeting kind of in between. So, but unfortunately, California is just one of those states that just, just looks at it a little bit differently. So hopefully, the what they've agreed to or what they're looking to do all works out for everybody.
Yeah, I agree totally. So what advice, Scotty, would you give to our listeners in their quest to buy a franchise? We call them aspiring entrepreneurs. We figured out after all these years, a lot of our listeners are really new. They're new to franchising. And you mentioned the number 4,000, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it is. When you have 4,000 different choices to choose from, I think it gets a little bit overwhelming. So, from everything you've learned up to this point, what advice would you give to our listeners then in their quest to buy a franchise? I imagine one of them, as I recommend, is meeting with someone like yourself, like a franchise coach or consultant, because I don't know how people go at it alone.
Yeah. I think a franchise consultant coach is great. Find somebody you're comfortable with. And the relationship that I have with my clients, trust establish on the first phone call. That's why the product. And trust is something you should establish with the brand that you become interested in.
Right.
And that's why the process takes 90 to 120 days. But my best guidance for someone, other than working with a consultant, somebody you're comfortable with and can trust, is give yourself permission to learn. Go into the process wanting to learn, asking a lot of questions. If you go into the process thinking that you know more than the franchisor, you're probably not going to go far. Two, remember franchises are awarded. They're, just because you may have the financial means, doesn't mean that you're going to be awarded a franchise. And, don't let your ego get in the way. It's okay to just start out with one or two. Yeah. You don't have to buy you don't have to buy every house on the block.
Sure. Yes, it's a great analogy, Scotty. I saw, because I listen to your podcast weekly, and I saw you recently had Nancy Leonard, who's a franchise attorney, on your show. And I remember when I had Nancy on my show, I think it was way back when, but, she was talking about, that there sometimes, not always, and you probably understand this a little bit better, but sometimes there is a little bit negotiation between the franchisee and franchisor. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that, because I imagine the big brands are probably not flexible in terms of negotiation, but maybe you have more leverage with the smaller brands?
Not on the fees. I think it goes without saying that, franchise getting themselves into some fistfights, arguments with franchisees as you move forward. But there are things that are negotiable, certain things like development schedule, whether it's a brick and mortar location or territory. If you buy multiple territories, there is a point where you have to eventually get all of those territories up and running. So there's a development schedule. Negotiated. Brick and mortar tends to be negotiated, especially today. It's hard to find a location, at least, that location, that spot. So you want to make sure that you have some time. And most brands, and in most cases, brands work with people on development schedule as long as you're active and putting the effort into help and working with their real estate team to find a location. You have nothing to worry about. But you just. The idea of going to someone like a Nancy Leonard is to dot your I's, cross your T's, and understand what your responsibilities are as a franchisee and what the franchisor's responsibilities are to you. It's kind of like a marriage contract. I mean, you know what your responsibilities are in a marriage, and you know what your spouse's responsibilities are. So, and you work together. So, it's important to be able to get along and work things out that you may disagree on. So I hope that answers your question. So, but Nancy's great. She's got a great firm, and like is that she works with franchisees only. She doesn't represent or franchisees.
Right. Yeah, and I think she's here in Pennsylvania too, Scotty. Actually, she's,
that is correct.
Not far from where I am. Yeah, so that's fantastic. How did you get involved in podcasting, Scotty? Because you have a great podcast, and I mentioned to you I listen to it every new show.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, how did you get involved in podcasting?
I have always been a kind of that boardroom presentation type of guy. I love being in front of an audience. I love answering questions too. Yeah. Actually, another consultant of that friends here suggested, hey, you should really look into podcasting. And I started being a guest, and I said to myself, well, wait a minute, I can do this myself. And I love being a guest. Don't get me wrong, but I just kind of read a couple of books and just started podcasting, inviting people on, and ran with it. Yeah.
It's educational too, Scotty, isn't it? I mean, I find I learn something every single podcast I do. And no matter how long, you and I have been doing this, you've been doing it longer than I have, but you learn something from your guests too, don't you?
Yes, you do. And again, it goes back to what I said before. And whether it's you're looking at investing in a business for the first time, it's the fifth time. It's educating yourself. A lot of people, I've gotten asked the question, well, why do you do podcasts? Well, I do podcasts to educate my audience. It's a tool for people to get educated on. It's going to a discovery day or meet the team day. I mean, yes, it is to find out information about the brand and meet the team, but you're also hearing questions from other potential franchisees and going, wow, I never thought of that. That's a great question. So again, my podcast may make the difference from somebody making the right decision versus great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it must be, I imagine, again, because you've been doing this such a long time, but the lives that you have changed because you've been involved in franchising and now you're a franchise coach. I mean, that must be a wonderful feeling for you, the ability to change someone's life through franchising, isn't it?
Yeah, or even, yes, the answer to your question, Marty, is yes. It's great because, 6 months, a year, 2 years, staying down the road, staying in contact with your clients and seeing how successful they are. But it's also as rewarding for me helping people make that decision that no, it's not the right time, or no, this isn't for me. Because the last thing I want to do is get a phone call from somebody that's invested, whatever it may be, dived into their 401k or took an SBA loan out and it didn't work out and they made the wrong decisions and they listened to me, they said, Scotty, I wish I had listened to you and not do this. Right.
Exactly. Exactly.
So it's not an easy decision. It should be a serious decision. It should be, and again, that's why it takes a long time to make a decision. But unfortunately, in franchising, as you know, that you have to get to a decision. There are no maybes. If you're at a maybe, you shouldn't do it.
Exactly. And it was interesting because I had so many takeaways when I met with you last time, Scotty. And I think you and I were talking about, there's no such thing as a perfect franchise either, is there? You know what I mean? You can always find something, with every franchise system, so there's no such thing as perfection either, is there?
Yeah, no, there isn't. Believe it or not. So people, if I get a client when they say to me, well, I'm looking for that perfect franchise, well, what's perfect for you? And most people can't even answer it. I mean, they, it's like buying the perfect lottery. I mean,
yeah, that's true. That's true. That's a great analogy. I like that. So what are your plans for the future then, Scotty? I mean, like, where do you see yourself, maybe a year or 2 years down the road?
Well, I've started some different, I wouldn't call them divisions, but some different education opportunities within my business. We're starting to offer coaching to consultants. We're also offering some coaching to franchisors, brands, emerging brands, because there's a lot of franchisors, especially in the emerging stages, those embryonic emerging stages, stages, don't realize that. At least it's my belief, and I think a lot of people agree with me, that franchising is a relationship business.
Yes.
And you have to build relationships. And we were starting to train some emerging brands about that relationship, not only with their franchisees, but with people that are interested in coming into the and so we're doing that. And then we're also starting to help some people develop relationships with consultants. How do you work with somebody like me? You just can't call me up and say, I have a great item 19, show my brand. But, where are those relationships? How do you build that relationship? So, so those are some aspects of some of the different things that I'm doing. But I thoroughly enjoy what I'm doing, helping people research business ownership. The testimonials, people reaching back out, thanking me is just more than enough. And I will continue to do that, but we're just adding a few extra layers of education to what I do.
That's wonderful. What's the best way, Scotty, for our listeners to get more information on your services? Like, how can they reach you? Are there any websites you'd like to plug?
Yeah, I mean, to listen to some of my podcasts, which are all things considered franchising.com. You can visit my website, Scott Milas, franchisecoach.com. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Send me a message. That's general question. Again, and as you know, Marty, my services are absolutely at no cost to the client. Yeah. So if I can help out in any way, there's no obligations. But again, just put yourself in a position to want to educate yourself and want to learn.
That's great. Well, this has been wonderful, Scotty, for me to finally get the chance to interview you. And, I'd like to, let's stay in touch, and keep talking to each other, because I always learn something every time I talk to you.
It's always great.
Thanks so much, Scotty. Thanks so much, Scotty. And we'll be right back with more franchise interviews. Coming up in our next segment, we'll be playing a clip from our Great Quotes in Franchising podcast right here on Franchise Interviews.
Franchise Interviews, an up-close, behind-the-scenes look at franchising and entrepreneurship.
Through our website, franchiseinterviews.com, where you can hear and read interviews as well as get tips from some of the most successful sources in franchising.
And our weekly franchise radio show, where each week you get to hear a new interview with franchisors, franchisees, franchise authors, experts, and attorneys. And don't forget to listen to our podcast, Great Quotes in Franchising. For more information, go to franchiseinterviews.com or call us at 610-905-2919.
That's 610-905-2919.
Hi, everyone. This is Marty McDermott from Franchise Interviews, and welcome to another edition of Great Quotes in Franchising, where each podcast you get to hear a great quote in franchising. Don and I have been hosting Franchise Interviews now almost during that time. We've had some incredible quotes on our show. Today, you're going to get to hear from franchise attorney Nancy Leonard, and I should emphasize the word franchise attorney. Picture this. Your cousin Joe just graduates from law school, and he specialized in corporate law or civil law, and you say, you know what? I'm going to buy a franchise, and I'm going to use my cousin Joe as my franchise attorney. Well, believe it or not, it happens all the time, and not a good idea. One of the things that Don and I, if you've listened to our show starting from 4 years ago to current moment, you'll see one of the main themes of the the show is that we emphasize to get a franchise attorney. Very, very important. Nancy is very, very knowledgeable. We've had her on the show 2 times up to this point, and she always offers us some great advice. Today she's going to be talking a little bit about leasing, and of course she's going to emphasize the importance of hiring a franchise attorney. And here we go with another edition of Great Quotes in Franchising with Nancy Leonard. Enjoy.
Franchise owners, you can do.
And not just any attorney, a franchise attorney, because another type of attorney isn't going to understand that what types of changes can and can't be made. This is a very unique type of document. It isn't like a lease, for example, right, which is a heavily negotiable document. We negotiate practically every sentence in a lease when we get it. But a franchise agreement is very different. A material change to the franchise agreement can mean that they have to change their disclosure document. So we know what can and can't be negotiated, what is a critical change, what is a critical thing to change.
Right.
And what is necessary to protect our clients.
Right. It's such a big investment in a franchise. Why not make the additional investment to have total peace of mind? Just make sure everything you're doing is correct.
And if if the franchisee is taking an SBA loan or some other type of financing, just include those fees. That's why we do it at a flat fee, so that people can anticipate what their costs are going to be up front,
right,
and just include that in the financing that they're going to be getting.
Right. Good. So I guess changing gears a little bit, Nancy, let's talk about, I guess, also your specialty in reviewing a lease. What are some legal concerns for franchisees in leasing commercial space?
Those are huge because, as I just said, the leases are extraordinarily negotiable documents, and everything in a lease is basically negotiable and negotiated. Because we do so many leases, and last year we did probably over 100 retail shopping center and mall leases, because we have certain franchise systems that we work with, and we are the recommended and authorized law firm for handling the leases for their franchisees. So we just do, plus we do it as obviously part of our relationship with our franchisee clients as well, and then any other clients that come to us that need a lease reviewed. So we do so many. Everything is up for grabs. I mean, one of the things that, for example, in any retail situation, you're going to be paying a franchisee or a tenant is going to be paying common area maintenance charges, known as CAM charges, in addition to their basic rent. And CAM charges are to cover the areas that are, as the term sounds like, common area. So parking lot expenses, roof expenses, the common area bathrooms and hallways or walkways if it's outside, and the lighting, electricity, the maintenance to maintain, repair, to replace, any of those kinds of items. Well, we have an exhibit that we attach to every lease that we negotiate or that we review and send on to the landlord to negotiate. We attach an exhibit of 28 items that we want excluded from including in those pass-through charges to the tenant. So these charges are passed through on a prorated basis to the tenant based on the square footage percentage that tenant has in the shopping center or mall, what is included in those common area maintenance charges can vary. And so we say that things such as legal fees relating to leasing the center should not be passed through to the tenant, our client. Expenditures that are of a capital nature should not be passed through. Repairs that are caused by the landlord or by another tenant in the shopping center should not be passed through. That's just a couple examples of 28 items that we have in a list that we negotiate on our client's behalf to be excluded from including. And so that can save, on a tenant's bottom line every single month.
And when you're starting a business, your overhead is so crucial. So, and this is, a major expense, of course, so just not what the monthly, rent or lease is going to be, but, all those additional things can all add up in a hurry, so.
No question. And even things such as what are included in taxes, that the rental income should not be part of the taxes that are passed through to the tenant, because most leases are what's known as triple net leases, which means that all expenses of the landlord are basically passed through. but we are very careful on what kinds of things should not be passed through. From a practical end, defining what the landlord's responsible for repairing and maintaining and what the tenant's responsible for needs to be very clearly spelled out in the lease, and often is not. The landlord should be responsible for structural repairs, but even what is defined as structural is critical to clarify. For example, if you have pipes that come from another space into your space, is that your responsibility or the landlord's responsibility? Who shares in that if there's a problem with that? So if it says that plumbing on the interior is your responsibility, what happens to those pipes? So those have to be addressed. Tenant is typically responsible for interior repairs and maintenance, for the plate glass, for non-structural repairs, and for the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system.
If you'd like to hear that whole interview with Nancy Lennard, all you have to do is go to franchiseinterviews.com and go to our franchises by category page and go to our franchise services section, and then you can hear that whole interview. In fact, we had Nancy on our show twice in the history of hosting franchiseinterviews.com. And lastly, we'd just like to thank everyone for making this podcast such a big success. This particular podcast that you're listening to with Nancy, this is our second most listened to podcast on our Great Quotes and Franchising podcast. So thanks, everyone, and we'll see you again soon with another edition of Great Quotes and Franchising from Franchise Interviews.
Franchise Interviews. From Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia, you're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews.